Section 1. The Three Students. Sherlock Holmes displays the fantastic powers of deduction that he is best known for when he races against the clock to solve this case for a college professor. One evening we received a visit from an acquaintance, Mr. Hilton Soames, tutor and lecturer at the College of St. Luke's. Mr. Soames was a tall, spare man of a nervous and excitable temperament.
"I trust, Mr. Holmes, that you can spare me a few hours of your valuable time. We have had a very painful incident at St. Luke's. Your discretion is as well known as your powers, and you are the one man in the world who can help me."
Holmes shrugged his shoulders in ungracious acquiescence, while our visitor, in hurried words and with much excitable gesticulation, poured forth his story.
"Tomorrow is the first day of the examination for the Fortescue Scholarship. I am one of the examiners. My subject is Greek, and the first of the papers consists of a large passage of Greek translation. Today about 3 o'clock, the proofs of this paper arrived from the printers. I had to read it over carefully, as the text must be absolutely correct. At 4:30, my task was not yet completed. I had, however, promised to take tea in a friend's rooms, so I left the proof upon my desk. I was absent rather more than an hour. Our college doors are double, a green baize one within, and a heavy oak one without. As I approached my outer door, I was amazed to see a key in it. For an instant, I imagined that I had left my own there, but on feeling in my pocket, I found that it was all right. The only duplicate which existed, so far as I knew, was that which belonged to my servant Bannister, a man who has looked after my room for 10 years and whose honesty is absolutely above suspicion. I found that the key was indeed his, that he had entered my room to know if I wanted tea, and that he had very carelessly left the key in the door when he came out. The moment I looked at my table, I was aware that someone had rummaged among my papers. The proof was in 3 long slips. I had left them all together. Now I found that one of them was lying on the floor, one was on the side table near the window,
and the third was where I had left it.
For an instant, I imagined that Bannister had taken the unpardonable liberty of examining my papers. He denied it, however, with the utmost earnestness, and I am convinced that he was speaking the truth. The alternative was that someone passing had observed the key in the door, had known that I was out, and had entered to look at the papers. A large sum of money is at stake, for the scholarship is a very valuable one. Bannister nearly fainted when we found that the papers had undoubtedly been tampered with. I made a most careful examination of the room. On the table in the window were several shreds from a pencil which had been sharpened. A broken tip of lead was lying there also. Evidently, the thief had copied the paper in a great hurry, had broken his pencil, and had been compelled to put a fresh point to it.
"Excellent," said Holmes, who was recovering his good humor as his attention became more engrossed by the case.
This was not all. I have a new writing table with a fine surface of red leather. I am prepared to swear, and so is Bannister, that it was smooth and unstained. Now I found a clean cut in it about 3 inches long. On the table I found a small ball of black dough or clay with specks of something which looks like sawdust in it. I am convinced that these marks were left by the man who rifled the papers. There were no footmarks and no other evidence as to his identity. You see my dilemma. Either I must find the man, or else the examination must be postponed until fresh papers are prepared. And since this cannot be done without explanation, there will ensue a hideous scandal, which will throw a cloud not only on the college, but on the university. Above all things, I desire to settle the matter quietly and discreetly.
"I shall be happy to look into it and to give you such advice as I can," said Holmes, rising and putting on his overcoat. "Had anyone visited you in your room after the papers came to you?"
"Yes, young Dolathras, an Indian student who lives on the same stair, came in to ask me some particulars about the examination."
"For which he was entered?"
"Yes."
"And the papers were on your table?"
"To the best of my belief, they were rolled up."
"But might be recognized as proofs?"
"Possibly."
"No one else in your room?"
"No."
"Did anyone know that these proofs would be there?"
"No one save the printer."
"Did this man Bannister know?"
"No, certainly not. No one knew."
"Where is Bannister now?"
"He was very ill, poor fellow. I left him collapsed in the chair. I was in such a hurry to come to you."
"You left your door open?"
"I locked up the papers first."
"Then it amounts to this, Mr. Soames, that unless the Indian student recognized the robe as being proofs, the man who tampered with them came upon them accidentally without knowing that they were there."
"So it seems to me."
On the ground floor was the tutor's room. Above were 3 students, one on each story. It was already twilight when we reached the scene of our problem. Holmes halted and looked earnestly at the window. Then he approached it, and standing on tiptoe with his neck craned, he looked into the room. The lecturer unlocked the outer door and ushered us into his room. We stood at the entrance while Holmes made an examination of the carpet. "I am afraid there are no signs here," said he. "One could hardly hope for any upon so dry a day. Your servant seems to have quite recovered. You left him in a chair, you say. Which chair?"
"By the window there."
"I see. Near this little table. You can come in now. I've finished with the carpet. Let us take the little table first. Of course, what has happened is very clear. The man entered and took the papers, sheet by sheet, from the central table. He carried them over to the window table, because from there he could see if you came across the courtyard, and so could effect an escape.
As a matter of fact, he could not, said Soames, for I entered by the side door.
You were not aware of any hurrying feet on the stair as you entered the outer door?
No, I can't say I was.
Well, he wrote so furiously that he broke his pencil and had, as you observe, to sharpen it again. The pencil was not an ordinary one. It was above the usual size, with a soft lead. The tutor told us that the outer color was dark blue. The maker's name was printed in silver lettering, and the piece remaining was only about 1.5 inches long. Look for such a pencil, Mr. Soames, and you have got your man. When I add that he possesses a large and very blunt knife, you have an additional aid. Holmes held out a small chip with the letters NN and a space of clear wood after them. What could this NN be? It is at the end of a word. You are aware that Johann Faber is the most common maker's name. Is it not clear that there is just as much of the pencil left as usually follows the Johann? The small pellet is, I presume, the black doughy mass you spoke of, roughly pyramidal in shape and hollowed out. I perceive. There appear to be grains of sawdust in it, and the cut began with a thin scratch and ended in a jagged hole. Where does that door lead to?
To my bedroom.
Have you been in it since your adventure?
No, I came straight away for you.
What about this curtain? You hang your clothes behind it. If anyone were forced to conceal himself in this room, he must do it there, since the bed is too low and the wardrobe too shallow. No one there, I suppose? The drawn curtain disclosed nothing but 3 or 4 suits of clothes hanging from a line of pegs. Holmes turned away and stooped suddenly to the floor.
"Hello! What's this?"
said he. It was a small pyramid of black putty-like stuff, exactly like the one upon the table of the study. Holmes held it out on his open palm in the glare of the electric light. You came back by an unexpected way, and so your visitor had no warning until you were at the very door. He caught up everything which would betray him, and he rushed into your bedroom to conceal himself.
The bedroom looks out on an angle of the courtyard, so as to be partly invisible. The man might have effected his entrance there, left traces as he passed through the bedroom, and finally, finding the door open, have escaped that way,
said Mr. Soames. Holmes shook his head impatiently. Let us be practical, said he. I understand you to say that there are 3 students who use the stair and are in the habit of passing your door?
Yes, there are.
And they are all in for this examination?
Yes.
Have you any reason to suspect any one of them more than the others? Soames hesitated.
The lower of the 3 is Gilchrist, a fine scholar and athlete, plays in the rugby team and the cricket team for the college, and got his blue for the hurdles and the long jump. He's a fine, manly fellow. He's very poor, but he is hard-working and industrious. The second floor is inhabited by Daulat Ras, the Indian. He's a quiet, inscrutable fellow. He is well up in his work, though his Greek is his weak subject. He is steady and methodical. The top floor belongs to Miles McLaren. He is a brilliant fellow when he chooses to work, one of the brightest intellects of the university, but he is wayward, dissipated, and unprincipled. He has been idling all this term, and he must look forward with dread to the examination.
Then it is he whom you suspect.
I dare not go so far as that. But of the three, he is perhaps the least unlikely.
Exactly. Now, Mr. Soames, let us have a look at your servant, Bannister. He was a little white-faced, clean-shaved, grizzly-haired fellow of 50. He was still suffering from this sudden disturbance of the quiet routine of his life. His plump face was twitching with his nervousness, and his fingers could not keep still. "I understand," said Holmes, "that you left your key in the door."
"Yes, sir."
"Was it not very extraordinary that you should do this on the very day when there were these papers inside?"
"It was most unfortunate, sir. But I have occasionally done the same thing at other times."
"When did you enter the room?"
"It was about 4:30, Mr. Soames' tea time."
"How long did you stay?"
"When I saw that he was absent, I withdrew at once."
"Did you look at these papers on the table?"
"No, sir, certainly not."
"How came you to leave the key in the door?"
"I had the tea tray in my hand. I thought I would come back for the key, then I forgot."
"Has the outer door a spring lock?"
"No, sir."
"Then it was open all the time?"
"Yes, sir."
"Anyone in the room could get out?"
"Yes, sir."
"When Mr. Soames returned and called for you, you were very much disturbed?"
"Yes, sir. Such a thing has never happened during the many years that I have been here. I nearly fainted, sir."
"So I understand. Where were you when you began to feel bad?"
"Where was I, sir? Why, here near the door."
"That is singular, because you sat down in that chair over yonder near the corner. Why did you pass these other chairs?"
"I don't know, sir. It didn't matter to me where I sat."
"You stayed here when your master left?"
"Only for a minute or so. Then I locked the door and went to my room."
"Thank you. That will do," said Holmes. "You have not mentioned to any of the three gentlemen whom you attend that anything is amiss?"
"No, sir, not a word."
"You haven't seen any of them?"
"No, sir."
"Mr. Soames, I would like to meet your students."
Come along, and I will personally conduct you."
"No names, please," said Holmes, as we knocked at Gilchrist's door. A tall, flaxen-haired, slim young fellow opened it, and made us welcome when he understood our errand. There were some really curious pieces of medieval domestic architecture within. Holmes was so charmed with one of them that he insisted on drawing it in his notebook, broke his pencil, had to borrow one from our host, and finally borrowed a knife to sharpen his own. The same curious accident happened to him in the rooms of the Indian, who eyed us, asked dance, and was obviously glad when Holmes' architectural studies had come to an end. I could not see that in either case Holmes had come upon the clue for which he was searching. Only at the third did our visit prove abortive. The outer door would not open to our knock.
"I don't care who you are,"
roared an angry voice.
"Tomorrow's the exam, and I won't be drawn by anyone."
"A rude fellow," said our guide, flushing with anger.
Holmes' response was a curious one. "Can you tell me his exact height?" he asked.
"Really, Mr. Holmes, I cannot undertake to say. He is taller than the Indian, not so tall as Gilchrist. I suppose 5'6" would be about it."
"That is very important," said Holmes. "And now, Mr. Soames, I wish you good night." Our guide cried aloud in his astonishment and dismay.
"Mr. Holmes, you are surely not going to leave me in this abrupt fashion. Tomorrow is the examination. I must take some definite action tonight. I cannot allow the examination to be held if one of the papers has been tampered with."
"I shall drop round early tomorrow morning. It is possible that I may be in a position then to indicate some course of action. Meanwhile, you change nothing. Nothing at all."
"Very good, Mr. Holmes."
"I will take the black clay with me, also the pencil cutting. Goodbye." We walked back. After a while, Holmes said,
"Here's a large stationer's. We shall begin our research here."
There were only 4 stationers of any consequence in the town, and at each Holmes produced his pencil chips. All were agreed that one could be ordered, but that it was not a usual size of pencil. My friend did not appear to be depressed by his failure.
"My dear Watson,
This, the best and only final clue, has run to nothing. But indeed, I have little doubt that we can build up a sufficient case without it." At 8 in the morning, Holmes came into my room just as I finished my toilet.
"Well, Watson,"
said he,
"it is time we went down to St. Luke's. Can you do without breakfast?"
"Certainly.
"I have put in 2 hours' hard work and covered at least 5 miles with something to show for it."
He held out his hand. On the palm were 3 little pyramids of black doughy clay.
"Why, Holmes, you had only 2 yesterday."
"And 1 more this morning. It is a fair argument that wherever number 3 came from is also the source of numbers 1 and 2, eh, Watson?"
Soames was waiting eagerly for us. "Thank heavens that you've come. I feared that you had given it up in despair. What am I to do?"
"The culprit shall not compete."
"You know him?"
"I think so. Kindly ring the bell." Bannister entered. "You will kindly close the door," said Holmes. "Now, Bannister, will you please tell us the truth about yesterday's incident?" The man turned white to the roots of his hair.
"I have told you everything, sir."
"Well, then, I must make some suggestions to you. When you sat down on that chair yesterday, did you do so in order to conceal some object which would have shown who had been in the room?"
"No, sir, certainly not."
"It seems probable enough, since the moment that Mr. Soames' back was turned, you released the man who was hiding in that bedroom." Bannister licked his dry lips.
"There was no man, sir."
"Ah, that's a pity. Bannister, up to now, you may have spoken the truth. But now I know that you have lied. Would you please remain in the room? Stand over there near the bedroom door. Now, Soames, please ask Gilchrist to step down into yours. An instant later, the tutor returned, bringing with him the student. He was a fine figure of a man, tall, lithe, and agile, with a springy step and a pleasant open face. Now, Mr. Gilchrist, we want to know how you, an honourable man, ever came to commit such an action as that of yesterday. The unfortunate young man staggered back and cast a look full of horror and reproach at Bannister.
No, Mr. Gilchrist, sir. I never said a word, never one word,
cried the servant. No, but you have now, said Holmes. Now, sir, you must see that after Bannister's words, your position is hopeless, and that your only chance lies in a frank confession. For a moment, Gilchrist, with upraised hand, tried to control his writhing features. The next he had thrown himself on his knees beside the table, and burying his face in his hands, he had burst into a storm of passionate sobbing. Come, said Holmes, kindly. Perhaps it would be easier for you if I were to tell Mr. Soames what occurred, and you can check me where I'm wrong. From the moment, Mr. Soames, that you said to me that no one, not even Bannister, could have told that the papers were in your room, the case began to take a definite shape in my mind. The man who entered knew that the papers were there. How? When I approached your room, I examined the window. I was measuring how tall a man would need to be in order to see as he passed what papers were on the central table. I am 6 feet high, and I could do it with an effort. No one less than that would have a chance. What happened was this. This young fellow had employed his afternoon at the athletic grounds, where he had been practicing the jump. He returned carrying his jumping shoes, which are provided, as you are aware, with several sharp spikes. As he passed your window, he saw these proofs upon your table, and conjectured what they were. He perceived the key which had been left by the carelessness of your servant. A sudden impulse came over him to enter and see if they were indeed the proofs. Well, when he saw that they were indeed the proofs, he yielded to temptation. He put his shoes on the table. What was it you put on that chair near the window? Gloves, said the young man. Holmes looked triumphantly at Bannister. He put his gloves on the chair, and he took the proofs sheet by sheet to copy them. He thought the tutor must return by the main gate, and that he would see him. As we know, he came back by the side gate. Suddenly he heard him at the very door. There was no possible escape. He forgot his gloves, but he caught up his shoes and darted into the bedroom. You observe that the scratch on that table is slight at one side, but deepens in the direction of the bedroom door. That in itself is enough to show us that the shoe had been drawn in that direction, and that the culprit had taken refuge there. The earth round the spike had been left on the table, and a second sample was loosened and fell in the bedroom. I may add that I walked out to the athletic grounds this morning, saw that tenacious black clay is used in the jumping pit. Have I told the truth, Mr. Gilchrist?
The student had drawn himself erect. I have a letter here, Mr. Soames, which I wrote to you early this morning. I have said I have determined not to go in for the examination. I have been offered a commission in the Rhodesian police, and am going out to South Africa at once. I am indeed pleased to hear that you did not intend to profit by your unfair advantage, said Soames. But why did you change your purpose?
Gilchrist said, I came to realize that I could not profit by such a deed.
No, indeed, said Holmes heartily, springing to his feet. Well, Soames, I think we have cleared your little problem up, and our breakfast awaits us at home. Come, Watson. As to you, sir, I trust that a bright future awaits you in Rhodesia. For once you have fallen low. Let us see in the future how high you can rise.
Arthur Conan Doyle. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, 1859 to 1930, was a British writer. He was the creator of the brilliant detective character of Sherlock Holmes. He wrote many stories with Holmes, fantasy, science fiction, and humor.